Good morning, everybody, and I'd like to begin our meeting of the Truckee Meadows Water Authority for Wednesday, March 15, 2023. If we can begin with a roll call.
Sorry, I apologize. Am I here?
Dare, like I dare you.
It's like dare, okay.
Yes,
Anderson,
I'm here.
Breckus,
Here.
Dirk,
Here.
Garcia. Here. Reese,
Here.
Zimmerman,
Here.
Foletta. Here. We have a quorum.
And Anderson.
Say it again.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance, and Ms. Dewar, would you like to lead us?
Sure. You join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just for a moment, I want to say it's good to be back in person. Thank you all for your support. I still have a few things here and there, so if I ever get up and just go, I'm going to ask if Dewar would just take over if I need that at this point. I don't have that. I'm feeling pretty good, but we just got through a whole nother meeting. But thank you all for your support, and the future looks great. You should have me around for at least another 50 years. So we do want to say that also, Von Hartung, if you saw in the news, he resigned from his position. And with that said, if that's news to you, he's getting a job at the state, and you can learn more about all that. And so, okay. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into our public comment. Do we have any public comment? No public. Okay, no public comment. Do we have any possible board comments or acknowledgements? Okay, let's go on. Can I get approval of the agenda? I have a first
Second.
and a second. Any other discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other discussion? Passes unanimously. And let's go ahead and have approval of the minutes of the February 15, 2023 meeting of the Tummo Board of Directors. Is there any questions or conversation or a motion?
Second.
Have a first with Anderson, second with Reese, and all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so for those, most of you all know we are going to do this, but we have our attorney-client conference we're going to go into now. We should be only about 10 minutes, and I'm saying that more for the board who's going in there to remind us that we're going to be in there for 10 minutes. And so we'll be back, and so we're going to go ahead and pause our time here today, and we'll be back. We're going to go ahead and bring back into session our Truckee Meadows Water Authority Board of Director meeting for March 15th, and thank you for all your patience. We're on the water supply update with Bill Hawk, and dude, you're overachieving. We like that.
Yeah, it's really turning out to be a massive snowpack year. I took this picture of Donner Lake on Monday morning, and this is at elevation 5936. You could classify it as a mid to lower elevation site, just to give you an idea how much snow is really up there. And you can ask Steph Morris. She's been shoveling out for 3 months now. So these are everything I have in my presentation was as of Monday. Things have changed
Okay.
and gotten better. So, but Lake Tahoe water content of the snowpack is 215% of normal. Truckee River Basin is 203% of normal, and basically the same theme throughout the state. Snowpack values well in excess of normal, and things are better the farther south you go. Carson and Walker Rivers in particular. Just massive snowpack this year. And this is one that changed over the last 2 days. The black line shows the water content of the snowpack this year compared to 2017. As of this morning, in both the Truckee and the Tahoe basins, we're now over 2017 by 2 or 3 inches of water in the snowpack. So massive year. And at this point in time, we're tracking better than 2017, which was our largest snowpack year on record.
Wow.
That snowpack is going to translate to significantly above average levels of runoff in both Lake Tahoe and the Truckee River at Fairhead this spring. And the river's already running high. Especially after the last week, the last 7 days. We had those 2 AR events. Rivers running higher than normal at the state line and through town. We dodged the flooding bullet. Flows came up noticeably, but we did dodge the flooding bullet. But all this precip we had has had a noticeable change at Lake Tahoe. Tahoe's come up a half a foot just in the last 7 days, just direct precipitation and runoff into the lake. Tahoe's actually come up 2.6 feet since its low on December 1st, which is pretty impressive. And Tahoe right now this morning is at elevation 6225.2, and that's actually higher than Tahoe was all last year. And that's before the runoff season even starts. Traditional runoff season is April through the filling period. So Lake Tahoe's expected to come up another 3+ feet. It should be the best guess at this point is 5/6 full, or about 83% of the way full. Right now, there's a 15% chance of Tahoe actually filling, and that's before the latest hydrology is going to be pumped into the model. So there's a good chance Tahoe could actually fill this year. So there's not going to be a lot of beach around the lake. And this just shows that we had the last 3 dry years. Tahoe is going to come up significantly. And what this means is, with a full Lake Tahoe, our water supply is in really good shape for the next 2 to 3 years for sure. So Lake Tahoe coming up significantly, potentially filling.
Could you, for a moment, we do have our new commissioners here. Can you explain a little bit of our reservoir? I mean, we look at this all the time and we get excited, but I want them to get as excited as we are. And they might be, but I want to make sure they understand it. When you're looking at this is a good example of our reservoirs.
Yes, the map of the Truckee River system, and there's 4 federally operated reservoirs: Stampede, Boca, Prosser, and Lake Tahoe. The 2 other reservoirs on the system, Independence and Donner Lakes, are owned by the authority, drought supply. But Stampede, Boca, and Prosser, with the latest forecast, are all projected to not only fill but spill this year. So it's, again, just a massive snowpack runoff year, basically resetting the system. If Tahoe fills, and it's basically reset, and we're looking at normal river flows for the next potentially 3 years.
And that leaves us how much, is it 80,000? How much water does that leave us for drought time?
Well, I'm
That's
gonna
just-
get into that in one
Okay,
of my
you're
later
coming.
slides.
Okay, sorry. I'll wait.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
explain that a little bit more,
Thank you.
Christopher. As of this morning, Tahoe's 35% full. I'm sorry, this was as of Monday. Stampede's about half full, Boca's half full, Prosper's a third full, and Independence is 79% full, and Donner 41% full. Now, as of Monday, Tumwa's storage under TROA is in really good shape, but because it's such a massive snowpack and runoff year, everything's gonna spill and fill. According to the terms of TROA, most of the water that we have stored per the agreement right now is going to convert to what's called fish credit water on April 15th. And that's how TROA is designed in these big years. All the water we've been storing and building up gets converted to fish credit water. So the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe can use that to meet downstream fishery targets and help Pyramid Lake. And in the next year or two, we'll begin to build up drought storage again, but that's what happens under TROA. And actually, part of that water will actually physically spill from Stampede Reservoir in June as well, so, because they're all gonna fill and spill, so. But it's a good thing. We're losing the drought storage, but it's a great thing because we won't have to worry about it the next 3 years. And this is just a projection for Truckee River flows at Fairhead through the rest of the year. You can see it's our biggest runoff year, going to be since 2017, bigger than 2019, and we'll have normal river flows the rest of this year, next year, and through 2025, very likely. And that's really about it. So just great news. This is going to go down in the books as one of the biggest snowpack years ever. Water content above 200% of normal in all the basins, above average, significantly above average runoff projected. Elevation of Tahoe has increased 2.6 feet since December 1st, projected to rise about another 3 feet or so by the time it fills or peaks in July. All reservoirs will completely fill and spill. Normal river flows are projected this year through 2024 and probably through 2025. And the chances with each of these storms we get that Tahoe actually fills increase. So right now there's an outside chance. So and the water supply outlook for the region is excellent. Couldn't be better.
Fantastic question. Sure. Ms. Burkus.
Yeah, just, in terms of modeling, trends, kind of long-term trends, and I know a lot of people have been doing, more recent modeling with the changing weather patterns. I think we use that Riverwise guy still, or what was that Riverware, that program. Like, when does this model get plugged in? When does this year get plugged into the models, and then you start to see, what it does to some of the models and the forecasts that you have? Is that something, a year this different, you start to go, well, what's that going to show on some of the models? Do you start to think about that?
Well, the model's updated constantly, and so it's an
but then
accounting operations model. It's also a short-term forecasting model.
But as a long-term forecasting model?
Some of the things we can do with it outside of TROA, we have the model. We can do some longer-term forecasting. Are you getting a climate change and all?
Yeah, I guess I'm getting more at the climate change modeling.
But I read an article a couple months back, and they were talking about the flooding we had in New Year's, and some of the experts from even Cal Davis were saying that this really isn't out of the realm of normal. So
it is normal.
yeah,
Yeah, but I thought as you went into more prolonged periods of drought, these big years are showing up to be more of the new trend, and then this might validate that trend.
Yeah,
So,
that
I mean,
is yet to be fed
okay,
in,
okay.
and yeah, we'll probably revisit that in the next water resource plan,
Okay.
taking these hydrologic years and doing some forecasting.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll ask you the whatever, $800 million question. So all my constituents say, is the drought over? What's the right answer?
Is in terms of water supply for Tumwa's customers,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like the system's gonna be reset.
Okay,
So,
reset.
there are different.
So we could say
different-
yes,
there are
probably?
different drought categories, agricultural drought. and all
Right.
that, But if you look at the snowpack, across the state, pretty impressive. Look at the Humboldt, 180, 175% of normal. To see rye patch fill this year, that would be really impressive. Like I said, the farther south you go, it's even better.
It's
Different
even better
categories
the
of drought
farther
out there,
south?
but as far as water supply for our region, it looks like most of the state,
Great.
the drought monitor may say
I
different.
like that answer. I've been very cautious, going, not yet, we need 2 more of these, but anyway, I guess it is, I get to say yes.
And
Go
to
ahead,
put the snowpack into perspective, as of this morning, there's 71 inches, almost 6 feet of water in the snowpack at the Mount Rose Snowtell site at 8,800 feet. Just try and visualize 6 feet of water. It's a lot of water. Donner Lake, the precipitation gauge we have at the lake, has measured 36 inches of water or precip since October 1st. So Steph Morris can attest to that.
So 2 quick thoughts. One is on the drought thing. One of the things we've talked about over the last couple of years is making sure that we take the time, and this, I know this is outside of your conversation, probably more to Andy and some of the marketing or some of the different things we do, is that making sure we're communicating that we're looking at reserve, not just what is rain or snow. And the combination of that is how we're doing with water, because that's the one thing that people get confused. If it didn't rain for a length of time, everyone calls us freaked out. But we're like, we're fine. We have all this water in reserve. But we love to see that communication be constant, that what you just said is a huge part of that conversation. The other thing is, just to you, the atmospheric rivers and some of the rain and stuff, is that, I mean, if we get a real warm rain, are we in trouble? I mean, how does that work? I mean, what do you think on that? I mean, it's nice that it's stacked up there, but I also, in my mind, remember whatever year that was, that all of a sudden.
17.
Was it
a huge year.
17?
19 was a huge snowpack year as well. Historically, if you look back at the flooding on the Truckee, almost all of the events happened prior to the middle of March.
Okay.
So really nothing happening after the middle of March. So I'm breathing a little bit of sigh of relief here.
Yeah, very good.
I'm not saying it's not, not a possibility, but if you look historically at flooding on the track.
I'll take your hope. I'm going to hold on to that.
We're through it. I think we're through it.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully it comes off nice and slow and
Mr. Zimmerman.
Mr. Chair, just real quickly, Bill, if you don't mind, maybe go through for the new board members, just as far as under TROA, the determination of a drought situation versus a non-drought situation, and just the timing of that.
Sure. Well, on April 15th of every year, based on the hydrological forecast as of the 1st of April, TROA comes out and makes a determination whether we're in a drought or non-drought situation. Well, we've been in a drought situation each of the last 3 years. This will definitely put us out into a non-drought situation, because we will have fluorescent rates through October 31st in Lake Tahoe will be above elevation 62, 23.5 past November 15th. So clearly in a non-drought situation this year. And as I mentioned, our non-firm credit water is basically going to spill all the way down to zero. 95% of it will be converted to fish credit water, and then the other 5% will physically spill around Memorial Day as Stampede comes up and actually physically spills. So, which brings us down to our base amounts, but it's a good thing.
I'm looking for a really nice article out there that's going to say what you just said, so we can not have to keep answering all the questions. So that'd be great.
I think that's a great idea, to have a piece by Tumwa about this.
Yeah. So, okay. Anybody else? We good? Let's go ahead and keep rolling forward. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. And good job. We know you make it rain, so we blame you one way or another. So, number 8, we're discussion of possible action, direction staff regarding the 2023 legislative activities, current bills, and recommended positions on legislative proposals. Ms. Stephanie Morris. And is Leo Drostoff here today?
This is Stephanie Morris, for the record. I do not see Leo,
Okay.
but that's okay. I've conferred with him, and we are on the same
Okay.
page. I promise to keep this high level because I do promise everything will change, and it has, and it will continue. So we have biweekly meetings set up with the legislative subcommittee. I wanted to just flag that we're tracking about over 70 bills now. There's a bunch of BDRs that we're continuing to track that have not become bills. There's 6 that converted to bills this week that will be added to this list. But I want to highlight just 3 or 2 in a group of a couple that we discussed at the legislative subcommittee. The first is AB 20, and that is the only bill on this list that we are asking for support. And you can see that in the recommended motion. As we have been discussing funding and potential grants and other federal funding in the last 6 months with this board to a year, one of the things that we've been struggling with is under the SRF State Revolving Fund loans that are administered by NDEP. They do not allow agencies like TAMWA to access clean water funds. They allow us to get drinking water funds, and there's two separate. And right now, the way the NRS is defined, it limits it to those jurisdictions that treat wastewater. And there's a lot of funding that's available for upstream watershed protection, as well as groundwater cleanup that's in that fund that we haven't had the opportunity to access. So this would actually change that and make it align with federal funding requirements, and would potentially allow TAMWA and agencies like us to access those funds or grants or revolving loans. So that's why we worked with NDEP on this to get this into a bill, and we think we should support it. SB, let's do AB 220. Yes,
On
sorry.
this one, is there opposition at this point, or does it look, I know you say everything will change, but does it look like there's a problem moving
The
forward?
hearing, Steph Morris for the record, the hearing that occurred, there wasn't opposition yet. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be.
Yeah, okay.
Moving on to AB 220. This is what is affectionately known as the SNWA Omnibus Water Bill. It's giant, but in large part, the hearing was this past week, and it was over 2 hours. There was a lot of neutral positions, some support, a lot of opposition. In large part, it was on Monday this week, and in large part, the opposition was from homeowners who have septic and well and are in Clark County, because those provisions are limited to Clark County. It requires you to connect to the sewer system if you're within 400 feet, and to the municipal water system if you're within 1,250 feet. There are a couple sections of the bill that would apply to TAMWA, in particular, potential changes to tentative mapping and agencies' approvals. So we are going to be having some discussions with SNWA, and right now we're a watch on that bill. And then there's just a couple other ones I'll mention. There's a group of Senate bills that are really aimed at dealing, there's about 4 of them, they're all kind of interrelate, dealing with groundwater management, and they in large part are in response to the Diamond Valley litigation and that groundwater management plan that was approved and didn't necessarily take into consideration priority of water rights. And so these bills aim to try to realign the priority for groundwater management, and or let those senior water rights holders opt out of the groundwater management. We're obviously watching those, and we're involved in a work session yesterday about some potential changes to those bills. So again, not a ton to report because it's all going to change. Questions on
Any
those?
questions? Ms. Breckus?
I mean, that was a big case, right? And so is this backlash to that ruling, or?
Steph Morris for the record. I wouldn't say it's backlash. I would say there were concerns about how priorities were handled in the groundwater management plan, and that the senior water rights holders were in that basin were largely concerned about being put in this groundwater management plan by those water rights holders who they considered to be junior. So
Yeah.
and so it's a way to try to adjust that. And I think we do have some concerns with the way the language is drafted, and we want to protect, our water rights and groundwater basins to make sure if we need to be involved, that we have a seat at the table. And I will say in the work group yesterday, there was a lot of movement towards correcting some of those issues.
But, and if I could, and I'm, really touching on an area I'm not an expert on, but I know it's very, a new way, is I could see that we would take a position, well, we're senior and we want to make sure senior people are okay, but there may be other situations or a future in a different basin where we're not senior, we're junior, and we want to be able to have the kind of resetting that we see, particularly since we may be a junior who is a public purveyor with a much higher public purpose than alfalfa growing, right? You know, I mean, are you looking at it from those two ends?
Sure, Steph Morris for the record. Of course, and we aren't senior in all groundwater basins. And I think what we are trying to do is ensure that the state engineer retains authority in those groundwater management plans, and that it's done in a way that would give all water rights holders, whether senior or junior, a seat at the table. So we're definitely cognizant of all of that. Thank you for the question.
So I just have one thing, and I said it the last thing, but I want to put it on the thing. The only thing I'm concerned about right now that I've seen is AB 220, and it's any precedent that I know how our state work, we've seen these things, and it may seem like this is all Clark County because it's tagged that. However, I'd like to make sure that we are doing what we can, and I know that our legislative committee already has that in mind too, but I'd like to share that with you, that if there's feels like there's any potential to see whatever they're doing down there leak up to us, which water does that, leaks all over the place, I would want to make sure we take appropriate stands quickly.
Great, thank you, Steph Morris, for the record. I agree with Mr. Folletta's comments on that in the past meeting. It is really aimed at the return flow, and the whole intent and description during the hearing is we want these return flows, and that is the key driver. A lot of these bills have population thresholds to limit them to Clark County like this one does, and my understanding is that almost every legislative session, they go in and sort of like an omnibus, just bump that up so it potentially likely would never apply in Washoe County.
Gotcha.
But
Well,
we will watch it.
Thank you. Well, I've just learned likely to never apply is very different. Sometimes it still does, so.
Agreed.
Anything else before we move on?
This, the recommended motion is that attached to the staff item is the bill list.
Okay.
And we went through this in detail with the subcommittee, and so the staff is requesting the board support the positions shown in the bill list and specifically to support AB 20.
Get a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
I have a first.
Yep.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And was there any more discussion? Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all your work on that. That's hard to keep up with. 9, discussion and possible action on adoption of resolution number 315, a resolution to approve funding for one or more of the projects recommended by the Truckee River Fund Advisory Committee, and an authorization for the Community Foundation of Northern Nevada to fund such project from fund proceeds. Sonia, and we have Carl Steelan in the waiting room.
For technical questions. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board of Directors, Sonia Folsom for the record. Before you have staff report from the Truckee River Fund Advisory Committee. They receive funding from TUMWA at the beginning of every fiscal year in July. The funding amount is usually around $850,000, but in years where TUMWA has specific special projects that they are looking to support, then funding is cut from the Truckee River Fund. The funds are used to support projects that address the grant priorities that are listed in the staff report. For example, aquatic invasive species, watershed improvements, local stormwater improvements, and rehabilitation of local tributary creeks and drainage courses, as well as environmental education. All of which are set to improve water quality, watershed protection, and benefit TUMWA ratepayers within the service area. The advisory committee reviews RFPs twice a year in the fall and spring, and then those recommendations are brought to you for approval, such as today. On February 17th, the Truckee River Fund Advisory Committee met to review the spring RFPs. The committee had about $359,000 available to fund, and they received 10 RFPs that totaled about $674,000. Of the 10 projects submitted for review, 6 were approved for recommendation to the board. All 10 projects are listed on your second page of your staff report. And the 4 that were not approved for funding, Mr. Chair Dare likes me to go over those at a high level. So number 273 was cart management down by Derby Dam below Glendale Water Treatment Plant and outside of TR scope, was not recommended. The number 274, which improves fish Fish Passage in the Tahoe Basin. Typically, the Fund Advisory Committee does not approve fund projects in the Tahoe Basin. Number 277, an interactive art installation to engage the public. Although it was an educational piece, it was outside the scope because of discussion by the advisory committee. And then the last one, number 278, was to test the efficacy of the bacteria Ziquinox in eradicating invasive Asian clams and New Zealand mud snails. And the committee decided that they expressed concerns about adding an organism into the river, and so declined that.
Yeah.
Of the 6 that were approved, again at a high level, 270 was the Great Basin Outdoor School. They conduct education programs for kids, and part of that budget was cut for the overnight camps up at Lake Tahoe. 271 was Sierra Nevada Journeys, again, their watershed education initiative that has proven successful in educating fifth graders and teachers, and then that spills into the home and the community, and improving watershed. Number 272, Cold Creek Stream Bank Stabilization, was submitted by the Truckee River Watershed Council to fill funding gap for the last portion of this project. And it supports Truckee River TMDL by reducing excess sedimentation and improving hydrologic connectivity and watershed function. 275 was submitted by the Indigenous Peoples Council on Biocolonialism for Healing Waters Institute, and it removes waste accumulating at the terminal end of the Truckee River system in the last 22 miles of the Truckee River. Number 276 was submitted by the Friends of Nevada Wilderness for their ongoing project to reseed and remove noxious weeds from the Hunter Creek watershed, which also improves water quality in the Truckee River. And the last one is number 279, which was submitted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to replace aging equipment and temperature monitoring that removes pollution from the Truckee River. And with that, I will answer any questions.
I'll go and open it up before I make my comments.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I want to say, first of all, thank you for the work that went into providing the information and administering the grants. A number of the grants seem incredibly important, and the work that is being done and then offered financial support for, I think, is very meaningful. So thank you for that. I want to focus on one of them in particular. It's Project 275 on your sheet, and it is the grant by the River Justice Groups and the Healing Waters Institute. This seems a very important one to me. So first question is, why was it not approved at the total grant ask amount? There's a difference there of about, I don't know, $6,000, something like that.
Yes, so the portion of the grant that was reduced was the funding request for conference and travel. So we typically, the Truckee River Fund Advisory Committee focuses on funding RFPs and portions of the projects that directly relate to the grant priorities listed in your staff report. So watershed improvement, protection, education, and aquatic invasive species, and sedimentation, which impacts TMDL. The portions of budgets that go outside of those parameters, then the Truckee River Fund Advisory Committee typically does not fund. And such conferences, travel training, they also reduce funding for staffing as well, depending on how much money is available in the fund account.
I suppose ultimately I may not quibble or vote against it on that basis, but that seems to be a thin reason not to support the entirety of the grant ask. And again, I don't know enough about the grant process of this organization, so it's hard for me to say. But I do think that the item that is before us is one I think it's biocolonialism as a concept, and the issues surrounding that are ones that I think we here locally are just beginning to grapple with. And I think the opportunity for folks to go to conferences where they are able to connect about that issue and then think about the way in which sovereign nation and indigenous persons have been seen as less than in a society in which it undervalues the connection to land, to water. These groups are ones that are intimately focused on protecting the most valuable resource of this area, which is water. And that resource has intrinsic value, it has cultural and spiritual value to the people who have lived here long before we have. And so I don't fundamentally understand why we would, as a grant opportunity, reduce the opportunity for folks to learn or connect about that issue. Again, the work that is presented by the grant and which is fully supported, I think is incredibly important. And as an environmental justice and social justice issue, I think it just behooves us to pause for a moment, reflect about the fact that we live in a place in which historical people groups lived here long before we did. There's this concept of stolen land, and the idea that this small part of that ecosystem gets impacted is a meaningful thing, I think. So again, kudos for the approval of the project. I think it is incredibly valuable, and in order to maintain the integrity of a resource which has been relied upon long before we were here is very important, and I think it's worth mentioning. What I would like to do is understand as we move forward and beyond this grant year, and as the grants process occurs, and as if I'm so privileged to serve on this body, this is just my concern that I would have liked to have seen it fully funded. And so, again, it's a fantastic celebratory moment of all of these projects. There are so many good projects. This one in particular really speaks to our region and its need to understand its history, its place and time, and so I wanted to call special attention to it.
I want to speak to this real quick before you answer, and I think on many points I agree. At the same time, I think it's important we kind of understand a few boundaries that we have, which might help us even in precedence and how we walk forward. Without question, our relationship with our indigenous, it's crucial. It's an element that we walk forward and where we can put our hands there. There are a few boundaries to look at. I mean, I say this just conferences-wise. We don't do this. It's important that we don't do this for others, and so it's important that we look at that and pull in boundaries on a regular basis. One of the things that's odd about this, and I'm glad it's approved, that they approved it and now it's coming to us, is that it's downstream. Now, the problem with that being downstream, and I just want to share this because of precedent in the future, these are just my thoughts. I have no idea what anybody else thinks about this, but Tumwa payers, though our relationship with our tribes is crucial, we tend to, this normally wouldn't have been approved. It was a little bit of an outlier because it's not upstream. We tend to always focus on upstream. And the reason why, and I just want to share, is that we have Story County and we have other people who have responsibility that we want to challenge them to do what they should do. Now, with that said, I have no problem approving this. I really don't. I actually think that this is a very good way for us to come alongside. I even know the people who put this in. I met them in Las Vegas, sat down and talked to her, and she's very passionate about what she wants to do there. And I think it's needed. And a lot of it's just cleanup. It's just a lot of cleanup that needs to happen. But the part that I want to see is if we're going to put out finances, again, this is my opinion, and Devin, you don't have to agree with me. I'm just sharing my opinion. I would like to make sure that our neighbors, our other counties and other areas are also doing their responsibility, that we're not just taking it on our taxpayers here to take a responsibility that should be also happening there. It does not mean that we don't care about the river because we do all this work here and then all of a sudden we're like, well, it's out of our jurisdiction. I'm not saying we do that, but I do want to be careful that we don't take on, because we know this, if you look at the roads, if we don't hold people accountable, other people are happy to let us pay for it and let us just take it on as responsibility. So I would like to see personally that we turn around and I mean, I'd like to make sure that these other jurisdictions are involved in what we're doing here as we support it. We don't want to do all this work here and have a bad, right as you get out of our jurisdiction, that it gets really bad. But at the same time, we need the other jurisdictions to step up. So those are some of my thoughts. I think we need to, like I said, I love that. I think the relationship we have with all of our community around us is crucial, and especially in repairing some relationship. I think we've done a lot of great work, of doing a lot of work right now, where we're trying to make sure that our arms are open and we're listening and we're hearing and we want to work together. So I think all that's happening, but I do think it's important that that jurisdiction is required to step up. Did you have something you want to share? Yeah.
No, Chair Dare, I would just say, yeah, typically the Truckee River Fund, funded by Tumwa ratepayers, looks to upstream water quality projects that improve water quality upstream of our treatment plants. The Truckee River Fund agreement that set up the fund is broad enough to cover this type of a project because it covers the Truckee River or the watershed.
Very good, very good.
Just a quick question on this. Was the $6,000 that was recommended for not funding, was that just the conference travel?
Conference and mileage, yes.
Yeah, and it looked like it was unclear, 4 people,
Yes.
6,000, 1,500. And I was unclear where, I know it wrote in this description, where was the conference?
That is a good question.
I mean,
Off the top of my
or what was the conference? I didn't quite grasp what it was, but anyway, I guess it's a pretty small amount, but I mean, it sounds like they're still paying for snacks and all the cleanup supplies and all of the hard costs that they're experiencing except for this conference, which I'm not sure what the purpose of the conference was. So just some thoughts.
I don't know those details either. Again,
But I do support clean up the river. I mean, it's one watershed. We've tried to, make that point over and over and over again. Up, down, middle, it's all one place. I think we keep calling our stuff One Water. We're sending water down to TCID, or down to Trick. We worry about stuff downstream that's going to Fernley and Fallon. So I'm just saying, it's not out. I'm glad to see it approved, and I think it is appropriate.
To answer your question,
Yeah.
Sonia Folsom for the record, Member Dewar, the description for travel and training is a bit vague in here. It just talks about hiring a third-party facilitator and having some indigenous-led stewardship program addressed.
Well, it mentions a conference travel, so I just didn't know if there was a specific conference other than travel to do the project. So anyway, I'm glad to see the majority of it funded.
Well, and like I said, I appreciate the conversation. Anybody else want to have any part of the conversation? I just want to make sure we put that out there of the only thing that, again, I think, and this has nothing to do with just water, this has to do with every element of what we do, is we have partners right next to us that we have to continue to find ways to go after, and that they're responsible for their portion of what's going on. So I want to make sure that we are doing our best to hold them accountable, and at the same time doing what's right on our end. So this seems right to me, but I think there's a combo in that.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve staff recommendations as to the projects recommended for funding included in Exhibit A, with a change that I would prefer, that I move that Project 275 be fully funded in the proposed amount of $95,717.
I'll second that.
We have a motion on the table and a second. Is there any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
could add, this item doesn't call for a resolution, so it's just a minor technical change, but the form of the motion would be reflected in a resolution to that effect.
Yes, that is the purpose of my motion.
Okay, very good. And with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
And Mr. Chair, just real quickly, I think before each agenda item is passed, just a call for public comment.
Yes, okay. Then can we go ahead and have public comment? I know she wanted to share. Thank you. Yeah, come on down. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. My name is Beverly Harry. I am the founder of River Justice. To answer your questions regarding the $6,000, the way that I had written the grant was to find 2 Indigenous interns that would be working with us. Those interns are going to work with One Truckee River. They're going to work with Tumwa. They're going to work with different entities to begin understanding exactly the waste accumulations that are occurring in the Truckee Meadows. I guess in the past, nobody has been really tracking exactly how much cubic yards of waste had been accumulating in the upper reaches of the Truckee River within the Truckee Meadows. And then especially like during the pandemic, which we're still in, there hadn't been actual information about, was this increasing? Was it decreasing? What are the problems with the solid waste accumulations throughout the Truckee River? This was one of the particular areas that the interns would be evaluating and working with the tribe and helping them develop the database to also look overall as how we're instituting capability to the tribe. And so we constantly need to be developing leaders within our communities. And so the area of work that the interns would be doing, they need to be able to present. And we would look at areas where Indigenous people are impacted and share that knowledge so then we could develop those leaders in a good way. So that was the reason for the conference. We would settle on one possibly with the American Fisheries Society. There's endangered and threatened species within this area, but there's there's so many amazing water conferences out there like the Water Summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your explanation. And we are on to number 10, discussion and possible action of the tentative budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, and draft capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2024 through 2028. Matt Bowman and Danny Rotter.
All right. Good morning, members of the board. Matt Bowman, CFO for the record. I'm up here with Danny Rotter, our Director of Engineering. In front of you is the staff report for the fiscal 24 operating budget and then 5-year capital improvement plan. Capital improvement plan, years 24 through 28. I'm going to walk us through the operating budget. Then Mr. Rotter is going to take us over the capital stuff. And I have a presentation to follow along with. So information's in the staff report. I'll be walking through the presentation. First thing I want to start with is just kind of a recap of what we do over the course of the year for our fiscal planning. So we're here in March presenting the tentative budget and CIP. The board approves that. We will file it with the state of Nevada as required by NRS law. In April, we're going to present this package to our standing advisory committee. The tentative budget is actually filed in April with the state. And then in May, we're going to bring back a final budget and CIP to the board for approval, at which point that will be filed with the state in June. And then in October, we're going to come back with our 5-year funding plan. And this is really where we come up with kind of the strategy long-term for the financial direction for Tumwa. We talk about rates as well in the fall. This year will be a little unique in that regard, and I'll get to that in a little bit here. So, okay, we'll go to the first slide. So, summary. I want to point out a couple of things. This is really comparing fiscal 24 to 23, what changed year over year in the budgets. And if you recall, when I was here last month, we had a budget augmentation for fiscal '23. So that's reflected in here. This is the augmented fiscal '23 budget that we're comparing to. And then the bottom, the blue line there is our net change in cash over the year. So first thing I want to point out, operating income, you can see $6 million lower than the prior year. Really what's driving that is higher operating expenses, and we're really feeling the effects of inflation. I mean, it's hitting us across the board. I talked a lot about, and our budget augmentation was for power and chemicals, which we augmented the '23 budget for. Huge increases there. We're hopeful that there's going to be a leveling off of that, and sort of an expectation as well, but still some increases to come there. That's reflected in this budget. Contracts that we're renewing, we're seeing prices go up, supplies, prices are going up, fuel costs are going up. That's reflected in this budget as well. Again, I think upside here is that I think we're all hopeful that prices will come back down to reasonable levels in 2024. I mean, that's the goal of everything that's going on with federal monetary policy and everything there. But right now, that's driving up our operating expenses pretty significantly, and that's reflected in this budget. I also want to point out capital contributions. So this line within our income statement reflects primarily developer contributions. So what we're doing next year is we are projecting a little bit of a slowdown, and I have a slide on this later that I'll get into a little more detail on too. So that's lower than it has been in the past. So now we'll kind of break it down a little bit. So we're going to go take a look at operating revenue in a little more detail here. The main driver you can see here is charges for water sales. So that's our billing that we send out for water consumption. Overall, total operating revenue up $3.3 million, about 3%. Nothing really of significance here. Our water sales model assumes a rate increase in June of 2023, which is planned and approved, so that will go into effect here shortly, 2.5%. We don't have any approved rate increases beyond that, and so what staff is working on is a long-term rate plan. And this is what I mentioned, that this year's fiscal planning timeline will be a little different because we're going to be bringing back this rate plan to the board late summer, early fall to look at long-term water rates and what we're going to do with those rates. And so a lot of planning, as you can imagine, goes into that, a lot of financial forecasting where we're at. The budget today isn't delving into that. The budget today is for 1 year on the operating side, and we'll come back with a discussion about rates later in the year. Just a couple of things on a couple more things on the water sales model. We're assuming average weather year growth of about 1.5%. But I want to point out, and this is kind of on the tails of Mr. Houck's presentation, the weather can really affect our water revenue. And so if we have a really wet spring, which we're having, and a wet fall, that can affect our revenue fairly significantly. What we've seen in the past is up to 2%, roughly $2 million or so. One thing I think, especially as this winter has lingered on and things are wet, is I really think this fiscal year and then potentially into next fiscal year, we might see a dip in our water revenues because of that, because I think people might just be watering less. So while it's great to have the water, it might not be such a good thing for our water revenues. We're going to dive into operating expenses. So this is the next section of our income statement. First thing to point out, salaries and wages, about 6.4% increase here. We have 12 headcount additions in this budget. In the past, the board has asked for this detail, so that's provided in the staff report. But really, a couple things I want to point out is 2 of the employees that we're asking for are for compliance with the EPA's revised lead and copper ruling, which requires sampling at schools and daycares. That's something we've never done in the past. That's a requirement that's upcoming. We have to staff up for that. It's a big undertaking. So there's two employees for that. We have 4 employees for hydrant maintenance with Washoe County. So as you know, we do hydrant maintenance for Reno and Sparks currently. On the table is Washoe County. The ILA is not complete yet, but it's close. And so we've added those employees to the budget with the expectation that the ILA will be signed and we will add those headcount next year. 1 employee is an overstaff for a pending retirement. So really the point of pointing this out is that 7 of the 12 are employees that we're adding kind of for more external factors. The overstaff will be a reduction in the future, so that'll offset, but it's It's an addition for this year. The remaining 5 are physical and cybersecurity, system maintenance, engineering, and then an equipment operator. What we did do during this budget, and you'll see this on the services and supplies side, is when we built the budget, we looked at where things were at with our costs, and we basically went back and said, okay, what can we do here to defer some of these costs? And so we actually pushed 2 headcounts out, just to try to bring our total costs down a little bit, and I'll get into a little bit more of that as the big picture is concerned later. But I wanted to point out that we did postpone 2 additions that we think are needed and they're justified, but we can live without them for now. But I will say that as we move through the year, depending on where we're at with the budget, say December of 2023, in that timeframe around the second quarter report that I'll be giving, if we have room, we may add those headcount because they really are justified within our operations. The next thing I want to talk about, services and supplies. So I touched on that at the onset. This is really where inflation hits us. Again, price increases across the board. In addition to the price increases, we do have increased spending on security, both cyber and physical, as we've really hardened our system, and again, both physically and virtually. We are working for compliance and to get up to the standards of Homeland Security. We think that our security is robust as it is, but we've intentionally over the last few years hardened that, and we're continuing to do that into next year as well. Additionally, our insurance costs, and specifically property, have gone up again. The last couple of years, if you recall, we've seen significant increases there, and it's really the property market. What we understand is that over the last 3 years, the property insurance market has just really been getting hit with unbelievable amount of claims, and so that's hardened the market. Premiums have gone up. We're subject to that as well, so we have an increase there. And then similarly to what I mentioned with regards to headcount, we did go back to this budget and we said, well, where are some areas where we think we might have a little extra? Let's try to trim it up a bit, get it down to what I think is a little more realistic. So we did cut some money out of the services and supplies budget. So I just wanted to point that out as part of our internal process. When we develop services and supplies budgets, we really do it from the ground up. We meet with all the departments, detailed meetings. We go line by line and we understand what that department needs, what they've spent in the past, and what they need going forward. And then we establish that budget. With regards to our operating budget as it is submitted to the state of Nevada under NRS law, we cannot overspend that. So we tend to build in a little bit of cushion just so that hopefully we don't have to come back with an augmentation. And so that's really how we developed the budget. So we after that process, we went back through, sharpened our pencil, if you will, a little bit. And I think we had room to do that. I still feel comfortable with this budget as it is. I think it's hard to say what the next 9 to 12 months are going to look like, especially on the pricing side. And so that's something where if an augmentation would be needed, we'd come back. You'll get my updated quarterly reports throughout the year. We'll be able to see how we're doing. If we're well under budget, you'll be able to see that as well. Next part of the income statement is non-operating revenues and expenses. This contains investment earnings, and the big one is interest expense on TOMWA's debt. So I just want to point out here, as you know, TOMWA's been reducing its debt principal. That's helped us on the interest expense side. You can see that again as a reduction of about $500,000 year over year in what we're paying for interest expense. The last section of the income statement is capital contributions. So at the onset, I pointed this out. This is where our developer contributions are. I want to point out these 3 line items here. We have will serves, area fees, and facility charges. Those are the big cash contributions that developers pay us to connect to our system. The line above it, developer infrastructure contributions, those are non-cash additions, so not as impactful with regards to cash flow in the budget. So I don't spend a lot of time there. They do affect us on our depreciation expense. So it's not a meaningless line item. But I want to specifically look at these 3 items here, kind of give you a visual of what we're doing with regards to projecting these items, because they're difficult to project because they're based on projects coming in the door, developers building out, and that kind of thing. But what we've seen here in the chart, really the peak was 2021. We've started to see some reductions in that, and this is on the revenue side purely. And so we're maybe conservatively bringing that down a bit into fiscal '24, again, assuming that things do slow down a little bit. But again, if you look at that, if you look at fiscal '24, we'd be pretty close to where we were fiscal '20. So still, I don't think it's that steep of a reduction. So I want to point that out. The last line here is contributions from other governments. The big item here is contribution from City of Reno for 70% of construction costs for American Flat. So as a reminder, TUMWA is constructing this project through ILA with City of Reno, who's reimbursing TUMWA 70% for the construction costs. That reimbursement gets reflected here on our financial statements because the assets are reflected on TUMWA's balance sheet. So that's why that line item's there. It's lower than the previous year just due to updated project schedules, rate of spend, and that kind of thing. So I wanted to point that line item out. Okay, so one of the things I want to touch on, this is important. This is TUMWA's senior lien debt service coverage ratio. So first of all, what is that? Well, it's TUMWA's operating revenue less operating expenses. That equals our net revenue. Then you divide that over our senior lien debt service, and that gives us our senior lien debt service coverage ratio. It's an important ratio because, for one, we're required by bond covenants to maintain 1.25 times. And so that's a requirement under our bond covenants. Additionally, the board has a policy to target 1.5 coverage. Okay, so what you're looking at in this chart is the blue line is our actual debt service coverage ratio. And as you can see, for 2024, the last column there, the budget, we're projecting in this budget to dip below board policy of 1.5. Okay, so that's important to understand. And really what's driving that and where we'll be is 1.35. That's the projection. What's driving that? 14% year over year services and supplies. So again, that's inflation. I want to give you an idea, kind of some parameters here to look at too. How could it get worse? Well, we could have continued rising inflation and potentially we'd need to make some operational decisions that might help to mitigate that. One thing within this budget, because we're looking at 1 year, we don't want to make significant operational decisions based on this for 1 year. And that's why I'm here presenting a debt service coverage ratio that's lower than policy, because we don't think it's appropriate at this time to make operational decisions based on 1 year. That's really what will feed into our rate plan and our longer term forecast, which we'll be bringing back to the board. The other risk here I want to talk about is just lower than budgeted water sales. I mentioned that before. That would affect our debt service coverage ratio as well. I think there is some upside though. The upside could be inflation relief like I talked about. And then we could also have higher than budgeted water sales. If we go into the summer and we have a hot, dry summer, hot, dry fall, we could make up any type of shortfall there on the revenue side as well with consumption. The good news is we'll have enough water to meet that because of all the stuff in the reservoirs like Mr. Haukus said. Another slide here, this is looking at cash flows. So the blue line there at the top is TUMWA's total cash, orange line, unrestricted cash, gray line there is restricted cash, and that yellow bar is the cash required by policy. So even with this budget, which again is high on the cost side, no doubt about it, we're still above our cash required by policy. A big part of that is our unrestricted cash reserve. And that's something that the board set up to have, sort of an insurance policy, safety blanket, if you will. And really the way I think that's looked at is we can weather certain events, kind of like what we have now with this inflationary period that we hope to be short-lived, without making drastic operational decisions. And that's really kind of where we're at. And so I want to point out that we are still above policy there. 2024, we're projected to be $193.5 million. The total cash required by policy is $180. So we still have $13 million of cushion, if you will, there. And then really what that cash required by policy is restricted cash, plus our rate stabilization fund, plus unrestricted reserve. That's the total there. Okay, and that's it on the operating budget side. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mr. Rotter, let's take us through the capital improvement plan.
All right. How's your back feeling carrying all that? I think I got like 2 slides.
Good so far.
Quickly to start, is Sandra here?
No.
Sandra Tozy, who works for Matt, does a ton of stuff on the CIP. We couldn't do this without her. She's the master of this spreadsheet with, I think we're upwards of 160 projects over 5 years, and she's even tracking out beyond this 5 years. So just want to give a kudos to her. She's a big help. So a couple things to point out. Will you make sure to get all those up there?
Yep.
Yeah. So with our red dots here, a couple categories and a couple projects I just wanted to kind of point out and highlight. The developer fee funded, so this is growth projects, trying to stay ahead of growth and keep the regional projects moving. It's not a one specific project, it's our regional projects. And so the couple main ones coming up are Spring Creek Well 10 and Lazy 5 Lowhead Pump Station. So these are both bringing, one bringing more surface water supply to Spanish Springs, one looking for more groundwater supply that is not impacted by arsenic or nitrate. And so those two things are gonna free up a little more capacity and be a little more comfortable out there. The next is reimbursements, and so this is obviously the American Flat is one being reimbursed by the city of Reno, but also this includes categories where we are constructing major infrastructure on behalf of a developer for a specific project. So there's two there that are out in Verdi, the Verdi 1 pump station, and then the US 40 tank and feeder main. And then the Silver Hills pump station is actually opening bids this afternoon, which has a project schedule coordinating with their pipeline and tank. And then the last one, but certainly not the least, maybe our retired chairman's favorite project to talk about was the Oreditch Hydro. And so we issued the notice to proceed on that a week ago. And so from what Matt tells me, we can't build that thing fast enough to start saving power costs at Chalk Bluff. So it's actually very timely. The portion of that that's the settlement related to the hydro is $7 million out of about the 28. The rest of it is hardening and improving that pump station as our backup supply to the Highland Canal. So really critical infrastructure. And I think we're set to, in a good year, in a year like this, we would see about 60% of our power costs from October through April paid for by this hydro.
Wow.
So those are the key,
That's right.
couple key things there. You've seen this slide from last time, but I wanted to kind of bring it to the forefront again. This is our big challenge from an agency standpoint, is the amount of infrastructure needed, one, to keep up with growth, and also to replace things that are coming due. So if you look at kind of these major facilities, the blue being the wells, the green being pump stations, and the orange being tanks, throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, into the 2000s, we were growing out and up. And so we needed more wells, we needed higher tanks. So there was a lot of infrastructure built during that time frame. Now we're building out and up more, which accounts for some of our projects here projected in the 2020s. Get that note up there. So I've projected just under 50 major facilities, but there's about 80 out there that some specific regional project could create another 2, 3, 4. And so some come in and are, are more, we're ready to go, and then some drop off. And so, but I think 50 is a pretty reasonable number there. So the other thing we have coming is you see the wave of infrastructure that was built in the 70s and 80s and 90s starts to come due to be replaced or rehabbed or upgraded. And so those are the things that keep me up at night, which is why we have one FTE and headcount in there. We pushed one off, but paired with coming retirements and those things, this is our main thing, is making sure we get this infrastructure constructed to keep everything going as we do.
Question real quick on that. Sometimes, I mean, we all have the same exact issue you're talking about in our cities and everything we do. We're constantly maintaining. We build great things and then we have to maintain it. But there are some things that are worth maintaining and there's some things that are worth letting to go for new technology. And so at some point, it might be wise for us to have a little update from you on what you think that looks like so we can really start looking for future budgeting. I mean, you might be doing that already, but I do know there's a balance in there. There are some things it's worth just keeping maintaining because it's cheaper to do and keep, and there's other things, just let it die and we'll replace it. So it'd be nice to know what you see in your expertise on that.
Okay.
So, yes, ma'am.
Are we ready for questions?
Sure, go for it.
So, okay, question number one, and good presentation both. Debt coverage. Didn't we, and I might have it mixed up with Reno, didn't we drop our debt coverage policy at one point?
Nope.
It's always been the, what do you have it as?
1.5, yeah. it was,
1.5 here, okay,
2003.
it might have been over in Reno, we changed our investment policies and some other things. Now, that ILA with Washoe County for the hydrants, for EEs, what is an EE?
Employee.
Oh,
Sorry,
it's
yeah,
just headcount,
employee, yeah,
HC,
yes,
okay.
yes.
So, I don't recall when we started doing Renos that we added that many. And I was kind of the one who said, well, Sparks has a deal, Reno sure wants a deal. And I don't begrudge Washoe County for wanting the same service, but why 4 headcount?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've deemed to be required, and I'm not familiar with when we did bring Reno on with the hydro
Okay.
maintenance, so I would have to go back and look
Okay.
and kind of understand that, but.
I do want to be sure, because I know that ILA is going to need approval here, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're working on the ILA with Washoe County and expect to bring it back potentially in the May, June timeframe. But Andy Gebbert can speak to
Okay.
hydrant maintenance.
Well, I just want to talk on one thing is, because 4 is big, we're not doing hydrant checks for Washoe County that are in a GID, like up at the lake. It's only Tumwa water, that is Tumwa customer water flowing through, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
It's only
okay.
within the
Okay.
Washoe County hydrants within the Tumwa service
Okay,
area.
gotcha. That's why I thought 4, maybe they're trying to push something over. Okay, next one is on the Capitol. The Mount Rose treatment plant that had a nice opening and then a very short life, as I understood it, with that weird cell you had, and I guess it's getting beaten up now. How much have you figured out how much you need to kind of rework that one, or?
So you're speaking of it was mid-August.
Yeah.
Thunderstorm that
Yeah.
came down and basically rerouted the creek up higher in the watershed. And it brought down a lot of DG
Yeah,
into our intake.
yeah,
So we just recently finished cleaning that out. We have some plans, but I don't yet have a number as to what improvements might be made. We're kind of right now just making sure we try and trap that sediment just upstream of our intake, and we have a bypass in place, but right now it's kind of just an operational cost until we take a look at it and say, okay, is the creek going to heal itself?
Yeah.
Is there something we need to just keep doing in the short term? So I don't have that answer just yet.
okay. I mean, I'm just, when I came on, and I think I'm one of the longer standing board members now at this point, is I was curious, because, oh, wow, we're doing this. And then, the price it took longer, the price kept going, and so, if at some point you cut your losses, or I think keep the board, really informed on this. I think this is a big one to inform the board on.
Yeah, and just to talk about that upstream event, I mean, until we're able to get up there and really assess the damage to the creek and work with, the National Forest Service and other partners to be able to really see, what that damage is, how to potentially correct it. But as far as bringing the treatment plant online, I mean, we're continuing to forge ahead with that. It's a key piece of infrastructure in that area.
Okay, and then the last one is American Flat. So I think that slide showed $112 million on reimbursements altogether, or total cost so far. And, I'm glad to hear you're going 5 years out on your modeling, because, we're not getting it from Reno, but who already took on a $65 million loan and has, in the plant completed 4 million. It's just waiting to plug in. So at least maybe over here, we can demonstrate, what we're thinking in the 5 years, because that's what last time I've heard is 5 years operational. I mean, do you have any numbers yet?
Are you talking about timeline for?
Yeah.
Operations?
Yeah.
I guess specific to the CIP, I specifically, so we include the total project in the CIP, and then Matt accounts for it in the reimbursements as far as how it's
Okay.
being funded. And so Reno is a little bit different because they'll encumber a larger chunk of a project in a fiscal year, not necessarily the cash flow. And so this CIP considers our cash flow in terms of design from now through spring of '24, and then about 20 months of construction. And so that's what this is based on, working with our CMAR contractor and their cash flow projection, and then our designer and their cash flow projection.
Okay, so 112 is our cost here for the whole CIP.
That's the total cost of the project. That's the cost that will go onto the books of Tumwa as an asset when it's over.
For capital,
Correct.
112 million. And you've integrated that into rate or, into everything else in terms
so
of
the-
rate, whatever rates you think you want to bring forward, maybe.
Yeah, and specifically for American Flat, the way we modeled and looked at that project is there really is no projected impact on customer rates at all. It's developer funded, 100% obviously with the city of Reno participating in it as well. But there's no projected impact.
Okay,
For
okay,
customers at all.
I do have one thing I want to say before we move on. I am watching all of our time and everything we're doing. Something for all of us to keep an eye on is our debt ratio. And the part of the reason I want to say this, I appreciate that we are keeping this internal right now and driving forward with what we need. But if this continues, this is what impacts our look at potential increase to our customers and so to our citizens. So something to keep in mind. And now with that said, obviously, if we felt our first step would always look internal, would be our encouragement, is always look internal and see is there someone we can squeeze. But I do think we have a pretty lean machine in a lot of ways. But it is something that I'm glad that I'm comfortable. I think the one thing that they need to know from us is that we are comfortable with dropping below our policy. That's part of why he put this in here. But also knowing that we'll keep a very close eye on it to help determine, because we can't stay there and we can't dip lower if we're gonna, and we have to stick within policies. So anyway,
Actually, if I
yes,
could-
sir.
So my question was actually right along those same lines. I would like to think that in the coming year, we're not going to see a 14% increase above where we are right now in services and supplies. But I was just wondering if by chance we're seeing reducing operating revenues, increasing expenses, have we ever thought about doing like non-employee expense reduction exercises or anything like that? How, if this trend isn't just a bump, that we're gonna come right back out of it, have we ever gone through that before?
Yeah, I'll speak to that as far as, to my knowledge, aside from the recession, and I wasn't here at that point, I'm not familiar exactly with what Tumwa did to account for that. I do know there wasn't any changes to staffing or anything like that, but yeah, absolutely. If there are any costs that we can control and we can make operational decisions that maybe hopefully would be short-term, or we have to really make some changes with the way that we run things, we absolutely will do that. I mean, we could, you come up with things like a cost savings register where you kind of go out to the departments and you say, look, we've got to find some money here and we've got to reduce our costs. And we've got to start talking about some priorities. We've got to talk about what we absolutely have to do, what we have to continue to do, and the things that we can potentially wait on and hold off on doing. And that's just on the operations side. I'm not talking about capital. So that's absolutely something we can do if we have to, no doubt about it. And I think we haven't done that yet, and I think that's because that will affect operations, and we don't want to do that. But if we need to, then yes, absolutely.
I guess I would just say that I wouldn't wait too long. My opinion is it's better to go yeah, we don't need to make any changes, but if we have to, we know where. And I think it's also a good check, because Tumwa's been operating very, very well. Everything's been smooth, but I think this is a good what if. That it might not be a bad idea to just check it and see where all the departments fall in, and see if nothing else, just make people aware that we need to be fiscally responsible and potentially have to make some changes if that direction doesn't change. But thank you.
The part that might help all of us as well is that if you guys are looking at the potentials that you could present to us, so when we have to make a decision whether we either increase this or remove this, we have a little bit of a time frame to make better decisions and really think about the ramifications of those decisions. So, I mean, hopefully it's a plan F that we never need. So it just sits over here. Yeah.
That one head count you're adding is, what was it, Security and Emergency Management Coordinator?
Yes.
That's an odd coupling to me. You know, we had discussion here about not needing a risk manager, but usually in my thinking, you see a risk and emergency management coordinator, but now you want a security. Is that like a security guard, or is it a security, you know, is it a capital person, or is it more of a professional, you know, an emergency coordinator? I get that, you know, that person goes into status, that person helps afterward with, you know, paperwork and that sort of thing. But do you have a, I know we're moving slowly, or, you know, want to move on. Do you have a position description yet drafted on that?
I'm not sure if we have we may have a position description, but generally, what that position will do will provide support to both physical security, but also emergency management. And really, what we want to do is we want to do and be more prepared for potential emergencies, tabletop exercises, running through scenarios, and things like that. And so that really is what this position is designed around.
And I'd even say, and I appreciate us having a conversation, but I would also say sits in the executive decision-making of if he believes he needs this, you know, kind of thing. I think some of that we need to be careful we don't dive too deep.
Well, but, you know, I really am putting it in the context of, you know, I've been on this board a while now. This is the most head count I've seen coming forward. And, you know, so it's a new one. So I do think, where's it going to live?
I think I'd say that's a fair question. I'd even say that
Yeah.
to our executive director, I'd redirect it is what I would
Oh,
say, is
okay.
maybe next time.
Where's it going to live? HR?
This will be with Human Resources,
Oh, okay,
correct? Yeah, and it's mainly like Matt said, it's an emergency management coordinator. Right now, our security coordinator is very, you know, taxed as far as the workload they have. And so we want to make sure we're doing as much as possible to prepare ourselves for emergencies. And then as far as the head count, I mean, you got to take into context that when COVID hit, we really stopped increasing head count just to make sure we could weather that storm. And so we're catching up from that a bit as well.
Thank you. We're gonna move on. We definitely need to make a motion on this, and
Sure, yeah, and,
yes.
and there's a recommended motion in there, and I want to touch on one thing, the debt service coverage ratio. So what we've looked at is we're going to ask the board to approve this as is. But when we bring back the final budget in May, we would provide actually a waiver to the board
policy.
for policy, because the debt service coverage would be lower than what it is. And to your point, then, to follow that, we'll be looking at our rate plan, talking about rate increases.
Thank you so much. So do I have a motion?
I can make one.
I have, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would recommend approval of excuse me, I'm on the wrong one. That's the one I did for Western Regional. I think I got this one here. I would recommend the approval of the Tumwa tentative budget for fiscal year ending June 30, 2024, and the draft capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2024 to 2028, and a modification or variance to our policy. Should I add that here?
He's going to bring that
Until
back next
later.
time.
Okay.
Final budget.
We'll leave that. We'll see if we need it, right? Okay.
We have a first, I have a second. Any other discussion? Mr. Reested. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Great job. Thank you for all the information. Is there a public comment on this? Yes.
actually your option since
I-
we have a period of public comment before. That's all.
I was going to say, it's a conversation that we can end up having. We don't do that. So we do it at the end and the beginning, and I don't do it at every comment. And so with that said, that's not normal. I say this, that I guess whoever ends up being the chair, if I get the honor of being that, then I'll make that decision. But for me, I think when it comes to running meetings, it helps us move forward and roll, so. Discussion and possible direction to staff regarding draft request for proposal and process to select board legal representation. John Zimmerman, Stephanie Morrison.
Thanks,
Stephanie
Mr. Chair.
Morris.
I'll take
Okay.
this one. So in January, the board directed me to come back with basically the answer to the question of what's the legal department consist of at Tumwa, identify the other law firms we've used and the cost associated with them, and then also come back with a draft scope for a request for a proposal for board legal representation. And so I've laid out in the staff report, our internal legal counsel is Stephanie Morris. She oversees water rights, lands, and our resource economist, but she also handles all of the internal legal inquiries and directs outside general counsel and monitors them. And then as needed, we use external legal on certain matters, and so we've laid that out by calendar year just to show the cost of legal over the timeframe. And you can see that I think since bringing myself on as a lawyer before Ms. Morris, and now with Ms. Morris, the legal fees are going down as far as external counsel. That reflects internal counsel taking on a large part of those duties. And then I've also put forward a draft request for proposal. It may be more broad than you initially requested in January, but I wanted to give the board the full aspect of this is what you could go forward with if you so choose today, or you could provide me with direction and I could bring something back later. The way I've drafted the request for proposal and the process for selection is similar to Western Regional because that was part of the direction. And so I've laid out just a time frame, and again, this is just draft tentative for your review and approval or further direction, but I would propose having those requests for proposals be due at the end of April and then bring back all of the candidates at the May board meeting. For Western Regional, they had, I think, 8 law firms that they that submitted requests for proposals. They interviewed each of those firms. I think they gave them about 5 minutes each and then answered questions, and then went through kind of the ballot process that I've described in the board packet. But all of this is just draft tentative for further direction from the board, and also I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Perkins.
Yeah, and I know we want to move forward. I was involved in the Western Water, selection process, and I think it was a good one, and I was pleased to see that you more or less replicated that in the process, in the scope. I also was a part of kind of the early call on the board before that, this board, for bringing in internal counsel. I think an organization this complex did need that internal counsel position to be the project manager of that function. And I think it's worked well, and I think it's reflected in this table, and this is the first time I've seen a table like that. My only question is, so the board will hire one, and currently the board has one that we've issued. The others are hired under your executive authority. We can sole source, so you can sole source professional services, but is there a procurement limit on the general manager under policy?
There is not, just basically within the approved budget.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's different from other, okay.
One other thing, Mr. Chair, just real quickly that I'll point out, is that with Western Regional, they received 8 proposals, and so there was enough time to get through all of them. At our May board meeting, that's our final budget approval process. So in order to give enough time for those interviews, the board may want to establish a committee or allow the general manager working with the chair to narrow down the field if we get more than a certain number of candidates, just so we're not inundated at that board meeting.
Yeah, when we get to the board, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Question?
Yes.
So, John, on the McDonald-Carano, I would guess this combines both providing the board with counsel at these meetings plus extra outsource counsel for special projects, is that right?
That's correct. Back in, I think, last May, I looked at how much legal work was mainly for board, legal direction. And the total amount I estimated, just based on reviewing the legal fees from McDonald Corona, was about 25 to 30,000.
Is just for the board?
Correct.
Okay, that's really helpful because that's what we're being focused on, is that 25 or 30,000 to support the board, right? Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions on this?
I would,
Yes.
well, I know that on that May 17th, we have our board here, right? Or no, what's the date?
It'll be May 18th, and it'll be in Washoe County
Okay.
Commission chambers.
And I think also Western and Kim Rigdon said the flood board goes that same day. So
Beautiful.
just wanted to call that, well, they're usually pretty quick, but sometimes they aren't. I have no problem with, and I didn't see it in the scope, 100%, 100-point totaling and the top three, provided you give us all and you show us how you scored them. And then we just interview the top three. I have no problem with that, but I want to see a scoring criteria, and then for each proposal, how you scored them.
I think that has to be a conversation. We're going to put that, I'm going to put that as a request, and we can have a whole conversation about how, who's going to be on that board and how we handle that
Okay.
for our next meeting. I only say that just to stay in our lane.
Okay, okay, but that's next April, and next April,
So the way I've styled this board report is to allow the board to today direct me to go forward with the request for proposal process. So notify it, have April 28th as the due date, and then come back to the board in May with the candidates for selection. If we're going to use a scoring process, I would just want some criteria from the board in order to,
We need some time to be able to create officially who's going to be on that committee.
We don't have to have a separate committee, though.
I was saying just have the executive manager and his team score.
Oh, I'm comfortable.
And-
I thought we said, okay.
Yeah, and I don't think you can let out a proposal without telling people how the selection process is going to go.
I understand.
Have that.
And I'm comfortable with that. Does anybody have a question on that?
No, I'll second Ms. Breakfast's motion.
Okay, very good.
And,
We have a first, we have a second, all in favor?
well, do you have you want some criteria for I think we can delegate the criteria for selection to you.
yeah, I'm fine with
Comfortable
that.
Okay, thank you.
Without question, and we can make sure we can communicate that as well. So, and information update. I know that we're running late on time on the informational update. Do we want to say that for next time, or do you want to?
I can run through it fairly quickly.
Okay, go for it.
Yep, if the board has time. So last October, I just laid out the management team's succession planning effort. And, the last phase of our succession planning was when we had a number of pretty high-level senior executives that were retiring. So it was more of a replacement plan. This time around, it's more broad. It's a true succession plan. And part of succession planning is employee growth and development. And so I wanted to give you an update. This is part of my general manager goals, this succession planning and employee growth and development. But I want to emphasize this is a management team effort. So the first step we had was we spent a substantial amount of time just going through internally as a management team, including supervisors, to really understand what are the drivers today, what are the priorities today, and what do we see those priorities changing in the future. And part of that exercise was for us to focus on, the priorities, but also to, with the eye towards giving employees an idea of what we think might be coming in the future. So when they go through this next exercise, which I'll talk about in a minute, they have the information, the awareness to kind of educate them and help them make a decision on their career. So the first thing, after we went through that exercise, Jessica Atkinson and myself, we presented the roadmap for succession planning, sort of the why we're doing this, to 3 employee groups, just to capture all of the employees that work out of the office, the employees that work out of our distribution crew area, and then also the employees that work out of our Glendale treatment plant, just to make sure we maximized getting to as many employees as possible. And again, that was in-person, virtual, were recorded, and we received a lot of positive feedback from that. And now we're going through department by department presentations, where once a week, a department talks to all employees about what are the priorities they're looking at, a little bit of a deeper dive. And another part of that exercise is just to make sure we have enough, we have more communication and kind of cross-subsidization between different departments so we know what the other side is doing and what their priorities are. And that's just to foster collaboration as well. So we're in the middle of going through that. And then the next step will be the career development exercise where each individual employee sits down with their supervisor and just talks through what they need, what are their goals for their career, and what tools do they need from TUMWA to help them with that. And then after that, that'll wrap into their annual evaluation process. And we're trying, as part of this, we're trying to make this more of a reoccurring process. Last time we did it, COVID hit, and that made it a little bit difficult. But we'll try to make this more of an integral part. And then another piece of it, we'll engage a diversity consultant on DEI, just to make that part of the process as well and kind of integrate it to TUMWA's core values as we go forward. And then in September, when you have my annual review, that's where I'll give another report and kind of wrap up the status of it at that point.
Fantastic. Fantastic. To remind, for those who are new, we had a conversation at one point regarding just the atmosphere and, what was happening in TUMWA, we had some different things happening, and with John coming on, with Mr. Zimmerman coming on, wanting to make sure that, so this is a little bit of an update on that. I think you're doing a fantastic job and appreciate all on that update. But if you ever have questions, you can reach out directly to him as well. So back to you again for General Manager's report.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, thank Vaughn Hartung for his years of service on the TUMWA board. He was incredibly supportive of staff, and that was a huge time commitment over the course of the years that he was on the TUMWA board, so we appreciate that. And then also in the news, you might have all heard about the EPA is coming out with a draft proposed rule on PFAS, PFOA. Those are the so-called forever chemicals that are in a lot of the nonstick fireproofing material. TUMWA is looking at that and looking at impacts to us. At this point, and as we've talked about in the past, we don't have PFAS detectable in our water system. We don't have, manufacturing that uses those chemicals in this area, so we don't see it, but it is a nationwide rule, and so we'll keep the board apprised as we go through that process.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Especially if you plan on any commenting on the rule? I mean, it's under the rulemaking process, right?
Correct. Yeah. Just came out.
I just, I don't know how that comes up, but from what I know, I'm supportive of the rule, and it'd be, concerning to me to see, us enter in, even if it's through association, against the rule.
I think what we can do is have Ms. Morris bring that up in the legislative subcommittee conversation when appropriate.
Conversation. I think it's important to have a conversation, so if whatever's representative and what's best for TUMWA. So now we're on for General Manager's report. Very good. Now we're open for public comment. Nothing. Okay. Any board comments and requests for future agenda items? Okay, I think we're good. And with what we said, that struck what I needed to say. The only thing I'd say is I want to echo, thank you, Commissioner Von Hartung, or I think ex-commissioner. I don't know how we do that. I think we keep people's titles that they had, but it's been an honor serving with him, and look forward. We have an incredible board. We have great people in our region that work together well, and I look forward to seeing that happen. And with that said, we are adjourned.